I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 27, if you would. There is a passage of Scripture I want us to begin to think about as we move towards Good Friday. We're setting aside our normal study in order to focus on this passage tonight and tomorrow morning, and then next Saturday and Sunday as well. So if you want to soak in it and saturate in it yourself, that would be phenomenal. But it's Matthew chapter 27. Chapter 26 and 27, of course, are really all connected. And in chapter 26, you have the religious trials taking place. There are three of them. In chapter 27, you have the secular trials are taking place as well. And of course, one of those is Jesus before Pilate, and what a scene that is. And as you move into chapter 27, into the heart of the crucifixion itself, it's interesting that we're given in fact, no details of his actual crucifixion. That is, the physical involvement of the crucifixion. We have no information on it at all. We have no information about how many times they struck the nail as they put it in his hand. Those kinds of details that we would like to know about the physical involvement are totally lacking. What we do have is a lot of scenes, a lot of information about what's going on around the cross and what of those who are actually participating in the cross itself. In verse 32, chapter 27, verse 32, we'll begin our reading. Now as they came, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they had come to a place called Golgotha, that is to say, place of the skull, they gave him sour wine mingled with gall to drink. But when he had tasted it, he would not drink. Then they crucified him, divided his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him there. And they put up over his head the accusation written against him. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Then two robbers were crucified with him, one on the right hand and another on the left. And those who passed by blasphemed him, wagging their heads and saying, You who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. Likewise, the chief priest, also mocking with the scribes and the elders, said, He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he is the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God. Even the robbers who were crucified with him reviled him with the same thing. Jesus, force us to camp at the foot of the cross. Force us to load everything up, move down, and live in the presence of the cross. Implant in our lives the essence of your death, that we might experience the flow of your resurrection taking place in our world. How are we going to get life to people who are dying? The only chance we've got, Jesus, you have told us, is that we would experience your death. We would live on the cross. That life is found in the midst of death. We are so full of ourselves. We are so cocky, arrogant. We are so full of our rights. so conscious of how we are treated, so wrapped up in ourselves. How could we ever be rescued from the destruction of our own self-centeredness? We're talking about our church tonight. How are we going to be a church that doesn't think of it itself, doesn't care about its carpet, doesn't protect its possessions, isn't concerned about its image? How can we be a church that would live in the presence of the cross? Speak to us, we pray thee, in this hour, in Jesus' name. Amen. Everything that I read to you is happening in the presence of the cross. In verse 32, I think it was last year, we preached a message called The Inconvenience in the Presence of the Cross. It's interesting, there's a man in verse 32 that's just minding his own business, come to Jerusalem for the religious holiday. He's involved, of course, in doing a couple business deals in the town, a few business contacts to pay for the trip. He's got his family there, 2 boys, you'll remember. And all of a sudden, his whole time, his whole schedule is just interrupted. And what an inconvenience, because they've grabbed a hold of him and forced him into participating in the event of the cross. How he must have griped and how he must have complained and said, oh, this is so inconvenient, and why did I have to get stuck with this? And in the midst of all of his griping and complaining, he didn't realize that God had appointed an hour for him. And as you read in the epistles with the Apostle Paul, his 2 boys ended up Christians in the early church, and his wife became one of the saints of one of the churches and ministered to the Apostle Paul, all because a man experienced an inconvenience. It's really inconvenient for God to interfere in your life. He never picks a good time. And wouldn't it be interesting if your inconveniences aren't inconveniences at all? They're the divine movement of the person of God in your life. You move into verse 33, and there are several events that take place down into verse 38, and we're going to talk about those tomorrow morning, so we'll skip over that. But it's actually the indifference in the presence of the cross. And then as you move into verse 39, it's interesting that the bypassers, he calls them bypassers, those who passed by blasphemed him. See, they're the people that are from the suburbs. Yeah, they have a 2.5-car garage. They've got 2.5 kids in the back seat. They're on their way, got their boat behind their vehicle. They're on their way for a weekend trip. And as they're on their way out, they enter into a traffic jam, and they get out to see what's going on. And oh, it's this crucifixion thing. They're nailing somebody called Jesus. Good night. What a deal. Blocks my trip, can't get through. Traffic is awful. And what do they know about Jesus? Oh, they're ignorant in the presence of the cross. They don't know anything about him. Only thing they know about him is what they read down in the Inquirer as they went through the grocery line. That's the sum total of it. Yeah, they've heard some statements. You who destroy the temple, build it in 3 days, save yourself. So they're lambasting him. Why shouldn't they? The rest of the crowd is. They join in. They're ignorant. They don't know what they're doing. Then you come where we want to be tonight, verse 41. Likewise, the chief priest, also mocking with the scribes and the elders, said. See, this is the institution of the church. See, chief priest, scribes, and elders is a phrase that Matthew consistently uses for the Sanhedrin. So he's highlighting in this passage the leadership of Israel, which are the representatives of the church. This would be the general superintendents. This would be the bishop. This would be the pope. This would be the whatever category you want to put them in. This would be the board members. This would be the Sunday school teachers. This would be the main essence of the church. They have gathered around in the presence of the cross. There they are. And they're mocking. I don't know what you think about the church. Probably I don't want to know. You probably could tell all kinds of stories about things that happened to you at the church. It's interesting to call in this community right out back. And as you knock on their doors, every single one of them that I ran into has gone to church at some time. They were a part of the church sometime, but not now. See, something happened. I could give a whole story. I could give a whole sermon just on criticizing the church. We could spend the next hour and a half telling stories. You could tell yours, I'll tell mine. I'll guarantee you this, for everyone you can tell, I can tell too. There's all these pastors who did. There's all of these evangelists who did. Well, there was that Sunday school superintendent. Well, there was that Sunday school teacher. Well, there was, the hypocrites of, and on it goes. And we could all tell stories. And the church, I would agree, has not been what it ought to be. We all hang our head on that one. Did you ever go looking for the perfect church? The only thing I know about it is if you find it, please don't join because it won't be perfect anymore. That's a given, isn't it? See, the truth of the matter was we were borderline perfect in our church. We were just on the verge. In fact, we were prepared to take the next big step, and we would just step into absolute perfection. And then you came along, and we brought you in, and down we went. Well, don't you want to be a perfect church? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because then I couldn't come if this was a perfect church. And so we're not interested in being a perfect church. Don't you want to have perfect services? No. Don't you want to preach perfect sermons? No. Don't you want to have perfect singing? No. Don't you want to have a perfect carpet? No. Do you know how clean we could keep this place if nobody came? It would be much easier. But see, that isn't the goal, and that isn't what we're about. And perfection is not what we're after, and we're not trying to have perfect services. And we don't want to. We love to have fights, and we want things. We want cigarette butts in our parking lot, and we want this. This is the way it ought to be. There ought to be upsets. There ought to be disturbances. Why? Because we're not interested in perfect people. We want you to come, and I want to come, and we want to beat heads together, and we want to seek together, and we want to go after this together. So, we're not here to spend an hour criticizing the church or telling what ought to be or isn't that terrible. Or see, I'm not a reformer. I'm not a rebel. I'm not here to straighten the church out. I'm not interested in that at all. It doesn't even enter my mind. What I'd really like to do is find a group of people who would be willing just to live in the presence of the cross and interact together and see what that would do to us. And if you want to call that a church, that's fine. If it takes organization to get that done, well, organize. Whatever it takes to get that done, it's okay with me, but the whole idea is to see the dynamic of what's going on, not in comparison to someone else. See, our goal is not to be the biggest church in town. Why would we want that? See, this is not, well, we had on Sunday and you had on Sunday, aren't we something? Do you know the mayor comes to our, what are you talking about? This is not about comparing ourselves to ourselves. See, this is about coming down to the foot of the cross and comparing ourselves to, oh, brother. That rips you up, doesn't it? Because to tell you the truth, when I compare myself to you, I don't look too bad. But see, when I get down here and I look at this dying Jesus, things don't, oh man, this this bothers, this upsets, this disturbs, this corrects, this alters my life when I come down here. So this whole business of comparing ourselves to others and who did what and who didn't do it and what they do and how we do it better than, what are you talking about? This is, come on, folks, let's come down here and get right in the middle of this cross thing and let's compare ourselves to a dying Jesus and see how we stack up. Because that's where it's got to be seen. So in this passage, you've got the whole dynamic of the church organization being seen at the foot of the cross. And I want to propose to you that there are some basic principles that he's laying out for us that come out of a group of people called the church who are willing to plant themselves at the cross and see themselves in light of the cross. And I want to walk you through this story and give you some of those principles. One of those principles is that we are shaped by our pronouncements. Did you notice in verse 41 what it says? Likewise, the chief priest also mocking with the scribes and the elders said. Now, it doesn't matter from that point on what they say. Doesn't matter. Because we've already discovered from the Word what the content is going to be about, what the emphasis is going to be about, and the emphasis is mocking. This idea of mocking is very interesting. Because you see, as you get into their statements, they were telling the truth. So mocking is not telling a lie. That's not what mocking is about. When you mock someone, you're not necessarily lying, as they were not lying. Look at their statement, verse 42. He saved others. That's the truth, isn't it? He did. They're looking at this Jesus who's dying to save others. And look, they look him right in the eye. And wasn't his whole ministry about saving others? And they're looking him right in the eye and say, hey, he saved others. He saved others. So they're telling the truth. Then they went on to say, himself he cannot save. That's the truth. Have you figured that out yet? You can't save yourself and your family at the same time. If you seek to save yourself, you'll lose your family, guaranteed. If you seek to save yourself, you'll never win your next door neighbor, guaranteed. If you seek to save yourself, you'll never win the community, guaranteed. A church that's focused on itself never wins anybody out there. See, the only way you can save others is to lose yourself. So see, they were dead right in their statement. He saved others. Himself he cannot save. Well, duh, that's true, because he is focused on saving others. Therefore, he could not save himself, because you can't do both. So see, they're telling the truth. Then what is the mocking all about? See, mocking is telling the truth, but it's telling the truth with an attitude. It's interesting. We'll have a big squabble, and then somebody will come to me and say, well, I told him the truth. What I said was true. Well, duh, okay. But it was truth with an attitude. It was truth embedded in sarcastic attitude. So mocking is not lying, but this whole mocking thing is all about this attitude stuff that's spilling out of them, which is, see, that's what upsets me about the cross. See, out there, I can be content by telling the truth, just the truth, regardless of attitude. You get down here and get involved in this dying thing and this Jesus shedding his blood and wanting to win everybody in the world to himself, and all of a sudden, the whole attitude, the inside stuff begins to be exposed. And motive begins to show up. And it's really interesting to me that there's a significant shift that takes place in their mocking. In comparison and in contrast to the bypassers. For instance, if you go back to verse 40, you'll see the bypassers in verse 39 are wagging their heads and saying, look at their statement in verse 40. You who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. See, they marched right up to the cross and got in the face of Jesus. Put their finger right on the end of his nose. He wasn't all that high, you know. They could reach out and touch him. And they got right in his face. And they talked to him. They addressed him. Look at the words, verse 40 again. You who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. See, they addressed him, looked him right in the eye, talked to him. Look at the leaders of Israel. Verse 42. Do you see it? He saved others. See, they're not talking to him. They're talking about him. Well, he's right there. Yeah, but see, they're not addressing him. See, they're gathered around in their own little circle around the cross discussing what's going on here. They're not talking to him, getting him involved in the conversation. They are actually just talking among themselves. He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he is the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross. We will believe him. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now if he will have him, for he said, I am the Son of God. See, they're talking about him. Isn't that interesting? Here's the bypassers who talk to him. Here's the church that talks about him. I'm not sure what I want to do with that. There's a parallel story to this, by the way. Adam and Eve. Remember? Yeah, Eve has been out in the garden researching, going through, finding some new plants. Oh, there was a new flower. She got all wrapped up, forgot to lay out the frozen vegetables. And lo and behold, she's rushing home to get dinner ready for Adam. He's upset if he doesn't get his supper at the right time. And as she's rushing by, this beautiful serpent shows up and says, oh, Eve, I've got the solution to your problem. This fruit of this tree. Oh, Eve said, no. We can't get involved in that fruit. We don't pick of that tree. We don't eat of that tree. Oh, he said, look at it. It's not that bad. It looks beautiful. Think of what would happen. You could take this and you could slice it and you could lay it out. And it would fill the plate, and Adam would love it. It would be fresh and new. He's never eaten it before. You ought to do this. Hey, you don't need to worry about the frozen vegetables. You don't have anything prepared. Anyhow, this is the solution to your problem. And she said, well, no, God said we couldn't. And he said, well, think about it. God just told you that. He didn't tell you all the truth. God's like that, you know. He just gives you partial truths. You need to think. And they begin to discuss, have a discussion about God. Do you know where the first sin was born? Wasn't born on the streets. Didn't come out of the bar. Wasn't it behind the alley where the drugs were flowing? You know where the first sin came from? From the theological classroom where we gathered around and discussed about God. A conversation where God was being talked about but wasn't present. That's where sin was born, folks. Now the same thing in a cross scene is taking place. They're not talking to him. They're not saying, Jesus, get involved in this. Hey, Lord, you want to give us some insight into this? No. They're discussing among themselves. The church is debating among themselves. The church is listening to themselves. The church is mouthing the same old words they've always said. The church is giving their own opinion among themselves. They're having a theological discussion, and crucifixion is born out of a discussion about God. How many conversations have you had about him without him being present? How many times have you discussed ideas, your thoughts? This is how he is, when he wasn't present at all. Oh, it makes me tremble to think, how many services have we had where we spent an hour and a half singing and discussing about him, and he wasn't present? I'm not a bit interested in that, folks. Why do you suppose we're that way? Why do you suppose we love to get together and talk about him rather than having him in the middle of the conversation? I think it's because when we talk about him, when we have a discussion about him, we're in charge. We can limit the conversation. See, it's comfortable because I can lay out what I think, and obviously if you don't like it, don't come back. Because I'm in charge here. And this is about my thought process and my theology and my ideas, and I can spill out all of this. This is what I think. And again, if you don't like it, go to another church. So we gather a group of people around us who agree with what we have to say, and we just bat our own ideas that we all agree on back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. And aren't we something as we discuss about God? But see, when he gets in the middle of it, when Jesus, the crucified Christ, comes and we are talking not about him, but he comes and gets involved in the conversation, that upsets everything. That expands my ideas, that makes me look foolish, that corrects my attitudes, that disturbs my thought process, that yanks me out of my comfort zone, that will not let me stay as I am. You know what I'm looking for? I'm not looking for a church that has the best singing. You know what I'm looking for? I'm not looking for the church that has the best youth program. You know what I'm looking for? I'm not looking for a church that has the nicest sanctuary. You know what I'm looking for? I'm not looking for entertainment. You know what I'm looking for? I'd like to have a group of people who would be willing to get together and live in the presence of the cross. And say, hey, change me. Correct my ideas. I'm willing to be altered. I want to live here. Could we have a church like that? Where every service, he is not talked about. He is present and is talking. Where every committee meeting, every board meeting, he is absolutely present, spilling his essence into us. We're seeing through his eyes. This has got to be. Where our opinions cease and we begin to hear his voice. Let me give you another idea in connection to the passage. Not only are we shaped by our pronouncements, but we're shaped by our prejudices. I don't like this at all. See, again, in verse 41, it's very significant that he uses the phrase, the chief priests, scribes, and elders, because they were the leaders. And you understand, in the political system of their hour, these leaders were the Sanhedrin. And they ran not only the religious institution, but the political system of their nation as well, because it was all tied together. So these were the top officials, the 70 individuals who had the most influence. They were the people who were the shakers and the movers of their hour. In fact, they had developed such high status. Well, let me just give you an example. The scribe, let's talk about him. See, the scribe was not just your average student of the hour. The scribe was an individual who was the upper class of all of Judaism. He was responsible for the scientific study and for the professional communication of the legal code of his hour. In other words, he was the interpreter of the Scriptures. When you went to court, he was the lawyer because he knew the Scriptures, and the law of the Scriptures is how you would be judged. And he was the interpreter of the law of the Scriptures. In fact, there were different classifications of the scribes. And the scribe, for instance, one classification which was really high was the sages. They were and there were certain passages of scriptures that you couldn't deal with unless you were a sage. You were not allowed to even read them. Why? Because you weren't smart enough. Because these are the boys that have the skill and the knowledge to handle those passages. And you can't, even though you might be a scribe. If you're not a sage scribe, you can't handle those scriptures. See, they believed that the masses of people were ignorant, and they were kept ignorant. And the only reason we let you guys hang around is to listen to what we have to say. So if you're going to know anything, it'll only be what we tell you, and we know you can't know a whole lot because we're not going to tell you a whole lot. Because that makes us elite. See, we scribes are here, and the common, ordinary individuals are down here, and it's never us, it's always them and us. We could walk into the Pharisees, who had there's another whole category, and their position and their hierarchy structure and who they were. See, they were elite. There's the Sadducees, there's the chief priests. All of them had their own special little categories of how elite they were, and they would never, ever, ever be among the common people. You remember, they criticized Jesus. What for? Well, he just hangs out with all of these. We wouldn't do that. Why? Because Now, watch this in the passage. This is so phenomenal. In the passage, look at verse 41. Likewise, you know what that means? Well, sure you do. In the same identical manner, in the same identical manner, the same as. See, it ties verse 40 and 41 together. Well, what's going on in verse 40 and 39 and 40? Oh, it's the common people, the bypassers. You know, the guys from the suburbs? Well, they're not bad, I know. They're just suburb people. They're just, common individuals who are just passing by. And the bypassers, what are they doing? Well, save yourself. Hey, you who say you'll tear the temple down, destroy the temple, and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down for... See, they're giving out with this blasphemy, and they're talking about him and tearing him down. Likewise, these elite, these never become a part of the common ordinary person, suddenly is doing the same thing and has joined the common masses at the foot of the cross. It gets worse. Look at verse 44. Even the robbers. So now you got three. You got the common ordinary individual, you got these elite society people, and now you've got the criminals, and guess what? At the foot of the cross, they're all doing the same thing. See, what's happened at the cross is you've taken a gigantic knife and you've slit these boys right down the middle and opened them up from the inside. And guess what? When you expose them at the foot of the cross, the common individual, the leaders of the church, and the robbers all look alike. And they're all saying the same thing. Isn't that awful? See, out there, I can parade myself. Out there, I can be superior. Out there, hey, I look really great. Out there, I can look down my nose at people. Out there, oh, I'm smarter than you are. Out there, but see, when I come in here and I come right into the presence of the cross, could you and I be exactly the same? Is the ground really level at the foot of the cross? I don't like that, because I like to feel superior. See, wouldn't you like to go to a church where you are a part of the superior group that can say, oh, look at all the people who didn't come. Well, we don't want them to anyhow because they don't fit. But you know what I'm looking for? I'm looking for a group of people who are willing to gather at the foot of the cross and in openness admit that we're all alike. And without Him, none of us have a chance. Do you realize what that would mean? That would destroy all of our prejudices, all of our superiorities. That would mean there wouldn't be anybody who would come here that wouldn't feel embraced, because we're all the same. Wouldn't it be something to have a church like that? Mercy. Let me give you another idea. Not only they are shaped by their pronouncements, and they're shaped by their prejudices, but they're shaped by their policies. It's really interesting, oh my, that their mockery, which is truth with an attitude, is focused on a, well, let's use the word style. See, the thing they don't like about Jesus isn't His miracles. The thing they don't like about Jesus isn't His free food. You know, the thing they don't like about Him, it's this, oh, it's His style. It's the way He approaches things. It's His mannerisms. Well, not exactly mannerisms. It's this, He seems to always have the same idea about everything. I mean, it always flows in a certain It's a style that he has about him that just irritates you. Look at the word they use. It's in verse 43. See, they use the word, he trusted in God. Let me give you their concept. He trusted in God. Now, the word trust there is in the present tense, which means it's now with continual action. So the idea is that has a continuation about it. So it isn't he just trusted in God for a moment. It means that he's been trusting, is trusting, and will continue to trust. So he's in this. We've looked at Jesus. They admit this. They've looked at Jesus, and he has been trusting in God. Every word that comes out of his mouth seems to be followed with the idea he's trusting in the Father. Every time he turns around, he's talking to us about how he's linked with God, how he's constantly trusting in God, how God is his resource, how he's sourced by God. It's just, this seems to be continual in his style. Now, here's their concept. Do you see it? Verse 43. He trusted in God. What should be the result of that? Well, their concept is there should be perks. You know? You trust in God, there should be benefits. Perks. You know, when you're the president of the company, there's perks that go along with that. I mean, you have the closest parking spot. You get the bonus. You have the month vacation. All of these are perks for being the president. See, when you trust in God and you really get tight with God, there should be perks. Right? I mean, come on. For trusting in God, there should be big benefits for that. There should be, perks. I mean, well, if you go on in the passage, if you back up, if in verse 42, if he is king of Israel. Now, being king of Israel, you got to admit there'd be perks with that. I mean, when you're king of Israel, you definitely get the biggest T-bone steak. I mean, there's no question about it. There would be perks that would go along with that. In fact, in verse 43 at the end, he said, I am the Son of God. Whoa, if you're the Son of God, come on, folks, that definitely would give you perks. I mean, big time, wouldn't it? There should be all kinds of benefits that would come out of that. What would be the benefits? Well, one of them would be you wouldn't be dying on a cross. See, that's what they're saying. If he really trusted in God, if he's really the king of Israel, if he's really the Son of God, well, one of the perks should be he'll come down from there and won't die. I mean, come on. If you're really spiritual, you wouldn't get sick. If you're really who you ought to be, you wouldn't need insurance on your car because you'd never get in a wreck. I mean, come on, if you're really what you ought to be, when your kids would be born with straight teeth. See, that's the concept. Have you ever thought that? Have you ever said, why did this happen to me? Is God punishing me? What did I do? Well, why did you think that was a punishment? What happened to you was a punishment from God. Well, because if you're really what you ought to be and you're really in tune and really God is approving of you, there should be these perks. See, this is upsetting, isn't it? Because I really like a church that has a reward system. See, if you come to church every Sunday and you pay your tithe and you're faithful and you don't talk about the preacher behind his back, then you know what you're going to get? There'll be perks. God will bless you. Your kids won't get sick. Your finances will all turn out all right. See, I like that kind of a deal, because then I can line up and do all the right things, and then I know everything will be all right. The problem with that whole thing is I've gone to those churches, and I've done everything just like I'm supposed to do, and it didn't turn out all right. See, I thought if you took your kids to church and kept them in Sunday school, they'd grow up to be saints. That didn't work out. See, what do you do with this, folks? See, this concept somehow that they had doesn't seem to, when you come down here and you get in light, you see all of this in light of the cross, you get the idea. This is not about, okay, God, if I do this, then you'll do that. Evidently, this isn't the setup. That what this is all about is somehow living your life in light of the cross, which is not about perks and benefits. It's about not about how I can use you, but how will you use me? How can I pour my life out? How can I be available? How can I bleed, suffer, and die? How can I? See, all my life I've looked for the benefits. See, this direction of life didn't work out too well because I got into trouble and this took place, and then my home went, and then I did, and oh, that was terrible. So I'm going to begin to go in this direction. Well, why are you going in this direction? Well, I didn't get the benefits in going in that direction, so now I'll go in this direction. So the same attitude that got you going here, because you were looking for benefits here, now you're looking for benefits here. So you were a con here, now you're a con here. So it's still a con. Maybe this business of the cross is not about that at all. Maybe this is about I'm not looking for benefits. I'm not looking for perks. What I want is, I want to give my life to you, and whatever you do with me will be okay. And in the dying to yourself, you begin to find what life is really about. Now, wait a minute, Manley. Aren't there results? Aren't there good things that happen? Aren't there perks? Aren't there going to be rewards in heaven? I guess there are, but I forgot all about it. Why? Because if you live down here at the presence of the cross, rewards aren't in your mind. And if you insist that there must be rewards in heaven, I'll grant that to you. Probably there are. And you know what the rewards are that Jesus talked about? For instance, he told a parable where this guy got 1 talent, this other guy got 2 talents, the other guy got 5 talents. The guy that got 2 talents doubled, the guy that got 5 talents doubled, and they got rewards. You know what the rewards were? They got more talents. The talent was responsibility. So see, if you serve faithfully down here at the cross this amount, you know what's going to happen? You're going to get the opportunity to serve more. So wouldn't it be something if the rewards in heaven is going to be, woo, I was faithful on earth, woo, I get to be doubly faithful up here. See, I got to pour my life out down here. Now I get to doubly pour my life out up there. See, my brain only operated on about 8% down here. Up there, I'm going to be able to pour my whole thought process into pouring my life out. Woo! Because you're living. See, I'm looking for a church. I'd like to have a group of people like that who somehow they haven't set up a reward system whereby if I do this, this, and this, I get a mansion in the sky and I get that and that and that. That it isn't a perk system. It's here at the foot of the cross I get to embrace him and know life. And his life is pouring myself out. Wouldn't it be something to be a church that never got together and talked about him, but always when they got together, he spoke in their midst. Wouldn't it be something to be a part of a group of people, a church, who they weren't elite. They lived at the foot of the cross and were constantly being exposed. And everybody felt comfortable because we're basically all alike, needing him. Wouldn't it be something to be a part of a people who are living at the foot of the cross, constantly in the presence of the cross, and are not setting up a reward structure where because I work harder than you do, I get more than you get. But wow, just the opportunity of him moving through my life was what I really wanted. Jesus, maybe spending a half hour, 40 minutes in the presence of the cross, I could survive that. But Lord, to live there, where you're dying, is constantly hammering my life. How would I ever survive? But isn't that the whole idea? I'm not supposed to survive. This is about dying. This is about the loss of my life. This is about giving myself away. And Lord, you know me. I am so stuck on myself and so wrapped up in myself and so determined to get for myself that I don't have the capacity of turning myself loose. And even when it comes to religion, I've got my hand out. I'm conning you, wanting my perks. Could I join you tonight at the cross? Could your death become my death? Could I lose my life? Could I never, ever, 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 ever again think of myself? Could this become not less of me and more of you? Could this become none of me and all of you? Because I'm living at the cross. Could I become an individual who is so filled with the life of the dying Christ that as he washed feet, oh, you would do that through me as well. And as you spilled your life out, so now you could spill my life out. And as you had your own hands 2,000 years ago, I now could become your hands. And as you saved others and could not save yourself, could I become that kind of man? Could we be that kind of church at the foot of the cross? Heads are bowed. If you're looking for perks If you want benefits, if you simply want solutions, if you're looking to escape, don't make your way forward tonight. Don't come to this cross. For it's here at the cross you will be brought to death. If you're willing to throw your life away, if you're sick of yourself, you could join the rest of us who want to live at the foot of the cross. Who are so tired of our own self-sourcing, living in our own defense, fighting our own battles, grabbing for our own selves. We only know one way out, and that's to die in Him. Jesus, we don't want to talk about you tonight. Would you come and talk to us tonight? We've told the truth with an attitude and talked about you. Would you embrace us and pull us to your cross? Our altar's open tonight. I invite you to die. I invite you to death. I invite you to throw your life away. I invite you to give yourself up at the foot of the cross.